education, public safety, healthcare, business. These and other important issues affecting our local community are identified and discussed with local and civic leaders here on Community Impact. Now with today's guest, here's our host, Jay Trelease.
Welcome to Community Impact. My guest today is a unique lady. Her name is Mary Robinson. She is the founder and the executive director of a wonderful organization that really deals with grief. It's called Imagine. They're located out of Westfield, New Jersey, in Union County, New Jersey, near my hometown in Garwood. I have to just do a little shout out to Garwood. Mary, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so
great
nice.
To be here.
It's so nice. Tell us a little bit about Imagine, how it started. It has a very unusual sort of origin, doesn't it?
Well, we started 3 years ago. Imagine is a year-round free grief support center.
But it started back on September 11th, 2001, right? I mean, didn't it? Or no?
Well, it was inspired. Imagine was funded by Dr. Jerry Glasser, who is a Westfield resident. He was born and raised there, raised his family there, and is a wonderful philanthropist. And on September 11th, 2001, his son, Tom, was killed in the World Trade Center and left behind a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So Jerry has 2 grandsons whose dad died on September 11th. So a number of years later, he and I met. He knew of me. I'd been working in the field of children's grief support, and he wanted to have a place in Westfield that served grieving children. All of his philanthropy was really focused on the community of Westfield and the surrounding towns. And he knew that it was really important that grieving children got support. He had heard again of the work that was doing in the field, but also is being done throughout the country. Imagine is based on a children's grief support model that started over 30 years ago out in Portland, Oregon. It's the very first one in the country, and it's modeled on that grief support center. So he invited me to come to Westfield and open a center. I chose the name Imagine because a child's imagination is a built-in coping tool. It's just part of who they are. Using their imagination helps them solve problems, make sense of losses in their lives, and cope with loss. And we also wanted to have children and the adults in their lives imagine a future of possibility and hope after the traumatic loss of a parent. So we wanted to, that's sort of where the name came from. And so he approached me and a number of leaders in town who formed our board of trustees. We started the organization on May 7th, 2012 is when we opened for direct service. So Imagine is a peer support group model. It's not counseling or therapy. Children who have a parent or a sibling die are grieving, which is a natural response to a life loss. And what they need is support. They need to know that they're not alone. So by coming to Imagine, they're with other children their same age. We serve children ages 3 to 18. We also provide concurrent support groups for the parents or guardians of those children. So the whole family comes together and meets in separate support groups based on age. The children and the adults have an opportunity to talk and tell their story, remember the person who died. For the children, they basically, especially the younger children, spend a lot of time playing, because play is children's work. And again, that's how they learn about their world and make sense of what's going on in their lives and express themselves through the symbolic work of play. They don't often, especially younger kids, have the words to put on their feelings. And in Imagine, they slowly start to find words to put on their feelings. The thing that helps any of us who are grieving, and grief is simply all of the range of emotions inside of us in response to any life loss. So if we lose someone or something we value or love, we're going to grieve. There's no way around it. It's how we're designed psychologically. And the key to how well we're going to do when we're grieving is what's called mourning. So Imagine and all the centers like it are really a place that is to provide a place for healthy mourning. And that is expressing the grief, not keeping it bottled up inside, but expressing it through our words, for kids through their play, through arts and crafts, through music, But the idea is to get it out and not keep it bottled up inside. So that's what Imagine is really an effective intervention and prevention program for children, so that we can help them develop healthy and constructive ways of coping with painful feelings. So it helps them at the point in time when they've had a loss, but also helps them for future life losses.
Now you come from this from a very personal space.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your own personal journey.
Sure. 41 years ago, my father died of cancer in 1974. I was 14 years old when he died and a freshman at Madison High School. My brother was a sophomore. My mom had been a stay-at-home mom, and when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, I was actually in junior school, middle school. And that's really when everything started to change. Dad looked different. He was in and out of the hospital. We were, really afraid what was going to happen and how we would be able to, survive. And so when he died, my mom ended up, again, stay-at-home mom, had to figure out how to get a job and pay the bills. My dad had just changed jobs when he got sick, so he didn't have insurance. So we were wiped out financially, which is not unusual when a family has a parent die. There's a lot of financial distress. So now mom is gone. She went into real estate. She's gone 24/7. It was like we went from a family of 4 eating dinner around the table every night to a family dispersed, each of us going in our separate ways and in our separate pain. My brother and I were definitely less resilient than our mom was, kind of fell through the cracks. Our grades went down. I quit all my school activities. So we were not coping well, and we were really behaving our grief. We were acting out the emotional distress inside of us, and nobody knew what to do or what to say. So this, again, 40 years ago, the schools had no idea. They have no training in grieving children and what to do and how to support them. So nobody said, Mary, why are you quitting the track team? Why are your grades going down? Why is your behavior changing? So I really, I feel like I lost years of my life to unresolved grief, and that wasn't necessary. So if, and one of the things that we do at Imagine is spend a lot of time on educating the adults in children's lives. So we go out into the community. We especially love going into schools and doing in-services for staff, but also doing presentations and workshops for youth and for students, just to raise awareness about this issue of loss, which is a universal human experience.
Yeah.
And yet nobody teaches kids or adults really how to cope with loss in effective, constructive ways.
Yeah.
So the education piece is really essential that we do. We do in-service workshops in schools. We go into agencies. We work with first responders. We do grief in the workplace. And one of the reasons it's so important is because research shows that the single most important thing that is going to help a grieving child is to have at least one functional, healthy adult in their life who sees them and gets it and knows that it's important to pay attention when a child has had a loss and to provide support. So the more that we can educate all of the adults in a child's life, so that wherever they turn in their life, whether it's at school or on the playground or in the Little League or in the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or at their friend's house, at the neighbor's house, there is an adult who's been trained, who's had their awareness raised, and understands how to listen to and how to support a grieving child or a grieving teen.
Amazing. Now, Imagine is just for children?
It's for children ages 3 to 18, young adults 18 to 30, and the parents of those children, parents or guardians. We also happen to have a support group for adults without children in our program, and that was really based on a response to a need we were hearing in the community. We were getting so many phone calls, and there's sort of that middle adult age, like 30 to 50, where they weren't finding support for themselves. There are a lot of bereavement groups for adults, but it tends to be more for seniors who've had a spouse die. So they were just not finding the right fit.
Yeah.
So we started running a group which is full.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised because, as you say, grief is universal. I mean, you're not going to live 10, 20, 30 years on this life or in this world without some loss, experience some loss.
And that's what we talk about in the workshops, because a lot of times people hear the word grief and they think, oh, someone has to have had died for you to feel grief.
No.
But we feel grief.
Yeah.
Kids don't make the team, they don't get into the college, a relationship ends, their best friend moves away.
Absolutely, you lose
know,
a job.
You lose a
Yeah,
job.
yeah. There's all kinds of grief.
All
Yeah.
types of loss.
Yeah, all kinds of loss, all kinds of grief. Yeah, but must be particularly scary for a child to lose a parent. I can go back to, let's say you said you lost your dad when you were 15. I could go back to the age of 15. The idea of losing my mother or my father is beyond frightening.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the reason is, when you think about it, for a child or a teen, your parent is your first love.
Absolutely.
They're your first psychological attachment.
Yes.
There's something psychologically that happens, and we attach to our parents, ideally. And it's the very people that you depend on for your survival. So for children, it's actually a traumatic loss. The key is it doesn't have to traumatize a child if they get support. And a place like Imagine is one of the ways that children can get support. There are other ways also, whether having a good support system of friends and relatives, having an adult who knows how to help you get a journal to write in your journal and help you go for walks in nature, use arts and crafts, use music and poetry, but helps children express themselves and not feel alone and helps them understand what their experience is, their experience of loss and the feelings that are inside of them, and helps them get it out. The thing about a place like Imagine and the other grief support centers around the country is that it's almost a magical model when you bring kids together with other children, and they come from all walks of life. So kids walk into an Imagine support group, and I've had kids say to me, I never would have been friends with these kids otherwise, but they're my friends for life.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it is they realize that what they have in common is what's in their hearts. It's not what they look like or how they dress or where they're from. So it's incredible in how it breaks down barriers and teaches kids, kids become more compassionate and empathic to other kids and their peers. So
don't we all become more empathetic towards our peers and towards others when we experience loss and grief?
Pain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no doubt. Mary, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about this.
Okay, great.
All right. You're watching Community Impact. We'll be right back.
The research here at St. Jude is very important. It gave my daughter a second chance at life.
We're developing tomorrow's cures today so that everyone around the world can benefit from those therapies.
La parte de investigación en el hospital es fundamental, porque si no hubiera eso, no habría ese porcentaje tan alto de supervivencia que dan.
Treatments invented at St. Jude have helped push the overall childhood cancer survival rate from 20% to more than 80% since it opened 50 years ago. And we won't stop until no child dies from cancer.
We are not just publishing a paper, but we're making changes to patient care.
Because we have donors that believe in what we're doing, we can really move our research forward much faster.
One life saved at St. Jude means thousands elsewhere.
Because of you. Gracias a ti.
Because of you,
There is St. Jude.
Welcome back to Community Impact. My guest is Mary Robinson. Mary is the founder and she's the executive director of a group called Imagine. They're located in Westfield, New Jersey, and they deal with grief, specifically grief of children. When a child loses their parent or loses a brother or sister, I guess Imagine steps in. You know, our producer Jason chimed in. He has 3 small children. And he was wondering, because you had mentioned, when you bring the children in, that play is a child's work, and you let them play, and you let them play out their emotions or how they're feeling. He wanted you to flesh that out. As I'm not a father, so I don't have that kind of insight. He found that very interesting.
Yep. So play is children's work. They don't yet have all of the vocabulary and words and life experience to be able to talk about what's happened in their lives. So they actually talk about it through their play. It's, symbolic communication, basically. So an example would be a child, I'll give an example of, I was facilitating in a 3 to 5 year old group. And there was a little girl, she was 3 and a half, Her father had died, and she was playing with the kitchen stove and pretending she was making food, and she said to me, "You sit there in the rocking chair." I said, "Okay." So I sat in the rocking chair, and she said, "I'm going to make you soup." And her dad had died, and she used to help feed him. And she said, "So I'm going to feed you and make you better." And so she would pretend she was feeding me. And in that moment, all of a sudden she stopped and she said, "I never got to hug my dad goodbye. And can I hug you?" And so she gave me a hug. And then she went back to playing, but she got to actually start to, just integrate that loss and start to understand what had happened. The other way that children use...
I just have to stop you because,
Yes.
Jason had made this point, and, we've been dealing with grieving a lot on this program. I've been dealing a lot with my grieving, and a great component of that, and it's just shocking to me, is anger. I think it might be a male realm, perhaps, not exclusively, but you mentioned a little girl. I mean, do the little boys become a little bit more aggressive? Are they acting out? Are they punching their friends, punching other little girls, perhaps?
So anger is, there's a lot of emotions that go with grief. So anger, sadness, regret, relief. It's a complex range of emotions.
Yeah. Relief, guilt.
Relief, guilt, and relief. People will say, "What is relief? Why relief?" I had a little boy say, "I'm glad my dad died. He was mean and abusive. Basically his story came out.
Yeah.
So he felt relieved. But then he also started to feel a little guilty because you're not, supposed to. So, but at Imagine, kids get to have all their feelings, their full range of feelings. One of the things they learn is, what do you do with those angry feelings? So instead of punching your brother or your sister, we have what's called a volcano room. And that's a room for physical, big play, big body movements. It's punching pillows and punching bags, it's banging on drums, it's
wonderful.
Doing somersaults.
Do you have that room for adults?
The adults use it too
Really?
sometimes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
There's scream box. All the kids get to make scream boxes, which is basically a shoe box stuffed with newspaper. They decorate the outside and put a hole in the end, and then a paper towel holder. Every household should have one for when you're feeling the need to scream.
Oh.
They scream into the scream box at the top of their lungs, and it gets muffled. So it's like, here, you have permission to scream,
right?
As long as it's not hurting anybody.
Right.
And you have permission to punch and get out that kinetic energy in the body that comes along with difficult emotions.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons, like when teachers talk about kids misbehaving or parents talk about kids misbehaving, it's not misbehavior, it's just behavior that's telling us something about what's going on inside the children.
Right.
So we give them ways to express that, discharge the emotion, express their feelings in ways that aren't destructive. So play serves a lot of different purposes. I remember working with a child who we have a sand tray, and so they get to bury things in the sand, and so in doing that, they start to talk about dad being buried or mom being buried. So it's just, again, it gives them an opportunity to start to put words on what's happened to them in their lives.
Right.
We do arts and crafts activity, which you could say is play. They make memory boxes. They do one activity that they did is we had big sheets of white paper. They laid down on the paper. They traced their body. We traced their body, and then they drew in on their body where they were feeling and what they were feeling and different spots of their body.
Yeah.
So it helps, they start to, again, it's just like start to understand their human experience.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great stuff. I'd like to...
It's interesting. Every so often a parent will say, "You know what? I need to go into the volcano room." And we have phone books. So on our wish list, you'll see used phone books and bubble wrap, and people are like, "Why do you need used phone books?" And it's because the kids and the adults we rip them up. And again, it's just getting that energy out and being physical in a way that's safe.
Yeah. Now, Imagine is a nonprofit organization.
We're a nonprofit.
You're the founder, executive director.
Yes.
You must have to deal with volunteers then. You must need volunteers.
We depend completely on We have 3 full-time staff and 2 part-time. And we serve 184 children and adults right now from 48 New Jersey towns every 2 weeks. And we're able to do that because of our volunteer facilitators. So adults 21 and up from all walks of life come and decide they'd like to be a facilitator. They take a 4-day training and they facilitate the support groups. So on a given night of support, when we have our peer support groups, we have about 60 children and adults and about 20 facilitators. We have 9 different breakout groups. They go to the separate age rooms based on their age. And then those volunteers facilitate the groups and they make a year-long commitment to be with that group.
Awesome.
So that's what makes it
My guess
possible.
is a lot of those volunteers are probably healing their own grief.
You know, yes.
Yeah.
You know, that's a beautiful point, is that, you know, really we're all
Grieving.
on
some level.
On some level, whether it's from long ago or a recent loss. We do ask that of our volunteers that if they've had a recent loss, that it's been at least a year since their loss before they do become a facilitator. And part of the 4-day training, which is very experiential, is an opportunity for the volunteers to continue to process their own losses and be on their own sort of healing journey. And the idea is so that it helps them become much more present and able to be with those who are grieving without it bringing up their own grief and loss.
Do you still deal with the grief of losing your dad?
I think there's definitely a myth in our society that someday you get over it and there's closure. I will probably miss my dad for the rest of my life, as everybody I've talked to who's had someone die.
Me too. Absolutely.
The key though is to sort of I don't like to use the word healing because there's nothing wrong, but the key to sort of recovering, I guess, in a sense, from the pain of grief is really learning to integrate the loss into your life and learn to live with sadness and joy side by side. So people think like, oh, we're supposed to be happy all the time. It's a really unfortunate thing.
You're quoting William Blake. William Blake said, "Joy and sorrow walk hand in hand in this world."
They do.
Yeah.
But I think, we're surrounded by images in the media that make us think we're supposed to be happy all the time.
Yeah.
So
Always.
I
happy, thin,
right?
sexy.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
I can still be moved to tears by seeing a dad walk down a sidewalk holding his little girl's hand.
Yeah.
And I miss my dad, but I also live a full and happy life. And I've been able to turn the pain and the loss and grief of that experience into something positive.
I mean, almost you have built, and I don't want to, but you really have built a wonderful, beautiful monument to your father. Your whole life has been a beautiful monument to your dad.
Yeah. I've been fortunate to be able to kind of create a legacy and also carry forward my dad's legacy, because he was a volunteer. He was someone who loved life and loved people and such a positive and kind person. So it's like I get to bring some of his qualities and continue them.
Well, your mom too. You had told the off-air that when your dad was dying, the whole community that you lived in sort of nurtured him. The pharmacist, your dad had lost his money because it was such a devastating illness. Pharmacists kept giving him medication even though he couldn't pay for it.
Yes.
And your mom promised everybody that she would pay them back.
Yes.
And she did.
Yes. My mom was extraordinarily resilient and strong. Sometimes she said, I wish people would stop thinking I was so strong, because,
Because I'm not. Yeah.
Because she's like, I'm a marshmallow inside.
Yeah.
And she lost the love of her life.
Right.
They were best friends. They've been married for 28 years. And she was really driven by fear. How am I going to keep the house and send the kids to college and pay the bills? And she did whatever it took, got a real estate license and went to work. So now I think of it as I carry forward both my parents' legacy, like who my mom was in the world.
Yeah.
It's I draw on their strength and what they gave to me, what they provided for me in my life to, really create something good.
Beautiful. The organization is called Imagine. How do we get in touch with Imagine?
So we have a website, imaginenj.org, and we also have a phone number, 908-264-3100. So those are the two best ways.
Good Union County phone number for you. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. God bless you. You're the best. You've been watching Community Impact. We'll see you next week. Take care.